Hi, I'm Kassandra or KZG.E, and I am an extremely enthusiastic Ethereum community member.
So, hi, Cassandra.
Hi.
Thanks for coming to our sweet interview spot. So, for the context, we are at DAppCon Day 3. It's about to finish. We're in Berlin. And today we will talk a bit about anything or everything, as usual.
Yes.
And of course, about privacy. So, we'll start with a bit of your introduction, just a few minutes, like who you are, what you do, and how you ended up doing that. A bit of your like personal / professional bio for people who don't know.
Yeah, cool. So I think I have a kind of a somewhat different background as a technical person in crypto than most others. My father is a mathematician. Both my parents were professors, so I had I already had some basis for sort of technical topics. But when I was younger, I was completely interested in other stuff. By the time I went to university, studying like semiotics, and I was interested in theater. I ended up doing a lot of like arts and theater stuff. I wanted to be a theater director and like choreographer. And I got into computers because I was making some uh, initially because I was making some dances with dancers where they were like zeros and ones and they would go through logic gates. So you do like a very minimal computation. I thought this was cool because the dancers knew the rules. They knew how the logic gates worked, but the dance could look different if you told which one, okay, you're a zero, you're a one, and then you kind of get a little bit of a different dance, but it's all the same dance. So I thought this was like a kind of very interesting theater work to do, and I was had some free time because I was finishing a master's, and I thought if I want to keep doing stuff like this, maybe because I have a technical background, I should actually learn a little bit about coding and things in like computer science topics that then I could bring to this theater work. And so I had like a roommate. I remember he showed me like a IPython notebook, and he was like x equals 5. Like I really started completely from the beginning in that moment, and then like, okay, now x plus 3 and it's 8, you know. And I saw that. I just started learning coding like on my, it's a code academy. I believe Python is what I started doing. And I only did like the first 30% of this course. And once I understood that you could take functions and start mashing them together to make like a real something that does something somewhat useful, like a big function where then you pass some parameters and then it just outputs, I don't know, the price of a hotel in X city, something really, really basic. I went, the light bulb turned on for me, and I spent like a year just diving into any and everything as just like a raw code. I think what I loved about it was this feeling that if you have the persistence and if you're just really want to make something, which I understood from the art world, I already had a lot of that in computers, you could just tech up so fast. You could, everything was available online with Stack Overflow and open source repositories for you to just by yourself just go deeper and deeper and deeper. And I thought this was really, really cool. And like, I was like almost a junkie for this. Just the feeling of how rapidly you could improve was so exciting. And so I was doing that, and eventually at some point stumbled on the Bitcoin white paper, built some tools for encoding your own Bitcoin transaction by hand, very badly built, like in Python with a lot of like raw hex strings. And the one thing I used a library for was the ECDSA signature, the digital signature. And so that was like the only part I didn't do like entirely by myself. And so I said, okay, how does that work? And I guess that's when the prehistory of Kassandra is over and the new phase starts, because once I really liked actually the low level cryptography and learning the actual cryptography topics and the math behind it and trying to implement those things by myself. And from then on, I was like, I don't know, it's been all crypto ever since. So yeah, I think that's a pretty different background. That's why I went so deep into it. But like, it's made it so that I really believe that people all you need to be a software developer is this persistence. You know, you kind of maybe have to like bashing your head in that sort of technical way a bit, and just like having this tenacity to say, I'm going to build it. And everything else is details. You can learn everything. And so I really encourage a lot of people who say they're not a dev. I'd say, I don't know, maybe you are somehow inside.
Wonderful journey, actually. That's not often you can meet a person who jumped into from theater to like development and then to crypto. It's like a very interesting journey. And regarding that, I have a question, because I'm a lot into art. I do that, I consume a lot. And for me, like my art bubble and my tech Web3 bubble, they are so far away from each other. And not so many people is like connected to art anyhow in our Web3 bubble. So what do you think tech Web3 bubble can learn from art bubble?
Yeah, I totally know what you mean, that these bubbles are very far away. I have this very much. My social life as a young person was all arts people. And now I'm like in this very different world, and it's all illegible to them almost. And so I think they can learn many things from each other, and there are actually points of contact that could be really nice. Like I think, for instance, it's a lot of times it's art people who are interested in this like alternative living type situations. Like, oh, what if, you know, the dream in theater that I was always around is, what if we could all live and work together on like experimental theater and like not have to worry about whatever, like the rent and the this and the that, and we could just make this deep work over a long time and then develop something really new. I saw this desire all the time for this sort of collectivist living and new style living situations. And I think in crypto, you have something super similar. A lot of this same desires of a way to opt out of like the classical living situation and to organize your life in a different way. And obviously in crypto, it's a lot more about using these technological tools in order to make that scalable or more useful or better somehow. And so the big disconnect, of course, is that, you know, I think in most of the world, if you're not in the tech bubble, you're very mistrustful of tech, because we've all been somewhat abused by, you know, the version of tech that is most distributed today, this like big tech Silicon Valley stuff that, you know, so those suspicions, what I mean is they definitely are valid, but of course the thing that I would want to push back on maybe is that, of course, that's not the entire field of possibilities of the tech. It's just one part that has been sort of deeply embedded in our lives, but that saying that the problem is technology itself or like technological progress could potentially be naive, and that actually we need more people like that who are distrustful of those things in tech, right? So yeah, I mean, I don't know, but I see a world where there could be more connection, more interpopulated stuff. But I think with tech, people in the tech world, in the tech bubble, need to understand and sympathize with some of these concerns, and also maybe with the ways of using language, right? In tech, we over-index on very quantitative things and objectivist things, and art is often about unraveling or problematizing this, and so like finding a common language is hard. But yeah, I am quite hopeful that there are ways that this worlds can co-evolve in a nice way. I think it's just, yeah, we need to I really think this site of artists and also like, or yeah, different types of people in the alternative scene and in young people could massively benefit from crypto. But yeah, that things need to be built and also put together with them in the right way. And that's what has been totally missing, I think. I don't know. Yeah, so I'm like of two minds. In some way, they're very, very far apart. And in other ways, I see how they could easily be like co-conspirators.
Yeah, 100%. And also, I think one thing that is really missing for this art bubble is UX. because those people, they would never go into this crazy code thing for like build like by tech people for tech people.
Exactly, totally. They need a UX which is actually legible to them, which they don't care about any of the tech, fancy tech, just for the fancy tech reasons. That's a good audience, because neither should we tech people, right? Those are just implementation details. The real thing is to produce things that are useful in the world. On the other side too, though, it's like, I think what these people don't realize, the arts and the other alternative living and so forth, is just how, like, they have a different kind of UX problem, or let's say like a scalability problem sometimes, where they want to do certain things, but then things break down, right? What if you have a thing where, I don't know, it's like a chore chart, and then nobody's doing the chores, and one person ends up doing all the labor or something like this, and things end up breaking down because they don't have, maybe it's systems that could streamline some things, allow them to be more scalable, more automatic. And so, yeah, from the other side, it's like they have not a UX problem, but they have maybe like a scalability or like an implementation problem of some of their big dreams too. So yeah, I very much hope we can all work together.
Yeah, that would be a cool future. Yeah, but speaking about now, can you tell a bit about like what are you involved in? What are you doing at the moment? Like part of what are you?
So yeah, I recently I was for a long time working in DeFi working on the liquidity provision side of decentralized exchanges and building smart contracts in that domain. But I recently left, and my new role, I would say, it's not in any organization, is the role I'm giving myself, is just an extremely enthusiastic Ethereum community member. And I'm very, very happy in my new role, to be honest, because yeah, I think I had a great time in DeFi. I learned a tremendous amount, but I was also to some extent radicalized by the way that the VC funded companies and the whole sort of DeFi industrial complex is guided by that, and some of the decision making and the sort of the path dependency around that, where I realized that it could be very hard sometimes. I'm taking it slow now about what exactly is the total next project, but I'm very deep in trying to revitalize the wallet user experience, embed privacy in there, and get shared standards in Ethereum and around this. And also, yeah, interested in layer 2 infrastructure, and maybe seeing how we can build that in a way that's different than some of this more VC-backed proprietary rollups. Can we have more like a public option? So this is a project called Ethereum R1 that I have been just sort of lurking around and helping out with too. So yeah, very excited about some of these initiatives.
Okay, and I also know that you are part of like Silviculture Society.
Yes.
If it's public.
Yeah. I mean,
if you're okay to talk about
we were publicly announced, so yeah.
Yeah, can you please like explain for people like what's that and what exactly are you doing and what's your purpose?
So yeah, it's that's a great question. I feel like what is public about it is we're a group of community members who I think most of us through different online forums, places like Twitter and Farcaster and other places where crypto people collect and talk, have all, I would say, some similarities or certain alignments around seeing this a long-term Ethereum project, and maybe something around sort of like maintaining the Cypherpunk core of this project, I'd say is somewhat what unites us. And besides that, we're just this very informal, I would say, sort of advice or ideas to Ethereum Foundation and Ethereum Foundation leadership on privacy, security, censorship resistance, and credible neutrality. And the form that this it's entirely confidential, but a way for us to be able to communicate in a one-on-one or in a group kind of way to Ethereum Foundation and see how the choices that they're making are reflecting these goals and this purpose. So yeah, besides that, don't want to say too much because it's somewhat private. But yeah, that's all like public information.
Yeah,
I think is great.
We respect your privacy. We have to. So yeah, but maybe you can like expand on like your vision of cypherpunk, and maybe a bit on like if you agree with Paul on like neo cypherpunk, like as like is this like modern evolution of that? Like just how do you see in general this term, and why it's actually important, if it is?
Yeah, that's a very, very interesting question that I would like to think more rigorously, because for me, it's still a somewhat loose collection, to be honest. I feel like I know it when I see it, and I feel I somehow know that I'm aligned with the cypherpunks, and I am one of them. But I don't know if I'll be able to super easily, like, nail down. And the truth is, when you read different things, you often see, you get these bullet point lists of what cypherpunk values are and what they're about, but they're never the same exactly. I do think, like, maybe to just start with, like, from the beginning, you have this stuff from the early, like, from, I guess, like 80s and 90s. And here you have people, like, for the first time trying to define this thing. And it was mostly people gathering around cryptography and like encryption technology at first, but generally different cryptographic techniques and ways, and maybe open source software as well, and ways that we can put these things together to sort of uplift the individual, or the ways in which people can collect and coordinate just among themselves, disintermediating somewhat the state and state power. So to me, this is what I saw as like the beginning or the core of cypherpunk is, let's use these technological tools. We have this computer, we have this cryptography, this magical cryptography that was only invented, or made public at least like in the 70s, that we got this asymmetric cryptography. And this radically changes something fundamental about the power dynamics between institutions and state power and individuals. Because before, there truly was no way, we didn't have any mathematical trick or way that two private individuals could, any two parties could create a private channel. Before asymmetric cryptography, there was no way for two parties to create a private channel among themselves to communicate without at some point having a private channel where they, maybe created a scheme or something, or passed a key around. And this is much less secure. It makes it much more difficult for, if we're in the public square, for us to be able to maybe get some privacy. Now, what does that mean? But here we just mean like our communications, only we know what we're saying back to each other. Something's just simple like that. And when you change this, when some magical math comes around that makes it that actually directly in the public square, in a place where we know we're being surveilled and people could tap into our communications without ever doing something secret among the two of us, we can pass across public messages and create this private channel, this cone of silence among ourselves. This is like it's for me, like you could almost see it as like one epoch and then a totally new epoch that should just completely reconfigure power relations. Of course, it doesn't exactly work that way. But yeah, I see this as like the motor. This new cryptography, this asymmetric cryptography, was a watershed change in sort of the structure of how we could sort of give power back to the edges instead of always concentrating it in the center. And then what the cypherpunk movement is about recognizing that, seeing a path for how we could actually sort of, okay, now the raw math, the raw techniques are there for this to be possible, but how do we make such a world where power is more distributed at the edges, where the individual is more sovereign? And there they have some techniques and a project, some ideas, some things ideological, some tactics like open source software, make everything in the open. I'll make it so that a free flow of information of these kinds of things, which is very interesting. It's like paired open source, radical transparency, open source, and privacy, and which like secrecy kind of all go together. So okay, so like that's the beginning of cypherpunk. And then, as you mentioned, that's maybe we're like in a neo-cypherpunk era, or there's something new to talk about today, because that was this response to a changing world, a sort of rapidly neoliberalizing West, and this watershed new technology, asymmetric encryption. But now many things have changed and maybe the beginning of the internet. Mm-hmm. All of this nexus, and you get this initial cypherpunk moment, and the like formulation of the cypherpunk ideology. But as your colleagues and you have all, I think, stated around these conferences here, things have changed a lot since then.
Yeah.
And maybe we need we need to reformulate some of these topics around the actual conditions that we had, just like they had. Now we have the political landscape has changed since the 80s. I mean, maybe some of it is still pretty much the same, but other parts are really different. Also, the technologies, cryptography has, thanks maybe to these cypherpunks who sort of led the way, this stuff is really, really important and powerful. We've unleashed just a tremendous amount of research. There's new types of cryptography that some of those people never could have imagined, maybe. And just a very, very different internet and tech landscape. So I think, I don't know, how would you, maybe I'd ask you about how would you see the neo-cypherpunk, what are the differences, between classical cypherpunk and maybe what you see as like the contemporary cypherpunk or neo-cypherpunk?
It's a good question. I can freestyle a bit because I never formulated it for myself, like specifically, okay, what is that? And actually this term, it's also, for me at least, it's quite new because I saw it in the thread of Polar. And I'm like, oh yeah, that sounds cool, like neo, because it kind of gives this sort of refreshment, even though maybe no one really understands what's behind. Mm-hmm, but then like neo, okay, like because the cypherpunk term, it's really kind of old school. It's from the 80s, right?
Yeah.
And so many things had changed. Like we have such a massive change of everything in just like 1 year. Like the tech, the politics, the world is going crazy. And it's really really, really different landscape, really different technology, really different people, and really different access to knowledge and tech. Mm-hmm. So I think it's also a part of us because we are trying to tackle this cypherpunk thing and make a course actually on that. Like, what does it mean to be a cypherpunk now? And I also, like, in terms of like neo-cypherpunk, I really like the term Carepunk. Mm-hmm. Because it's a lot about the ethics and ethos of care, love, and support. Because I think that's kind of a core value that maybe for our collective is something that we care about, and like people around us, I think as well. So you mentioned that when you talked about the redistribution of powers, and I think this is the point, because like power is super centralized, and how I feel like care and love for the society in general is like kind of to help to undermine this like vertical of power of this crazy people in power. We are going too much right wing, in my opinion, globally. And that thing is kind of help us to redistribute the power weights a bit and give it a bit to people, I hope. So something like that,
That's really interesting that you pair this care thing, which is also something which is like, state power is this thing which seems like it's always ever increasing its sites of where it applies itself. And like, if you, some classical scholars of power like Foucault and so forth would say that like power got everywhere. It sort of exploded, and it used to be, you had this very stark, also very intense centralized state power. The issue was it couldn't get its hands on you so easily. The king would come around once a year and maybe wreak some havoc and say, you have to die, or you have to give me all your land, or you have to go to a war. But then he goes away, and then there's like this space in between. There are these margins, and the margins used to be really, really massive, and now they've and throughout modernity, you had this explosion and proliferation of institutions and surveillance technology and many other things that started to make these margins much, much thinner and smaller.
But your king is here every day, like saying you should do that, you should do that.
Exactly, working to modify your behaviors and what is governing or what is power more than being able to sort of direct the actions of others. Now we have all these inputs doing that to us all the time in a very, very different way than you had in a sort of like a classical period or some period before now. And I feel like the interesting part though is that you can never be total. There are always some margins. There are always some places where you're a little bit removed from that, from the empire, and these are these things that might seem little everyday things, like caring for each other, are some of these sites where things are happening outside of only sort of from the central power direct lines going out to everything else, like how we organize and communicate. Instead, you can never stop. Always some grassroots something is always emerging. And there are many great examples of how, no matter how totalitarian it gets, there's always a margin somewhere, a place where people are starting to say, we have to take care of each other. So yeah, I really like this framing of care. And I also, in general, I've really learned from Web3 privacy now, this feeling of, privacy can make more sense and be more active for people if it's situated in a larger understanding, a larger project. And I feel like putting together things like care and other things like this, I think make it, it's ambitious, and but it also, I think, is the right way to make it, to really bring it to people to understand it in a way that it means something to them in their lives, not like some tech stuff over there.
And also it's like care about like me and my data. It's also sort of reframing from like, oh, I'm paranoid, maxi, privacy maxi, I need to hide myself, oh my God, like, don't look at me, I hide my face. No, it's just a reframing that like, okay, you are conscious about your data usage, and then you care about this data not being given to like right-wing guys or to surveillance capitalism or whatever, you kind of do like a soft resistance, but it's just act of care, it's like you have a sunscreen because the sun is kind of intense, and the politicians and capitalists are kind of intense, and you just do this like light protection. You don't like, I don't know, overestimate it. It's just an organic part of life,
Absolutely. Two things out of that I really love. One is this idea that I've never thought of it that way, but like as a personal privacy and online privacy as just a form of self-care. Like my girlfriend always says I need to do more self-care, like in the morning, put some stuff on my face that I never want to do, and so forth, and it's like, but that self-care is the thing that's always brought to you. Like, it's not about wanting to look a certain way. It's about caring for yourself. One can sort of frame privacy the exact same way. This is just about having this, care for yourself, your identity, your self-worth is also wrapped up in this privacy. And the second thing that I love from what you said, and I fully agree with, is this idea that resistance to power, I think most people feel very much like this is so difficult, so why even try? And so because they frame it only as you need to make the total revolution, and of course this is extremely difficult and complex and scary and traumatic. Everyone is so afraid about this, the difficulty of this kind of resistance, and so you get demotivated, and you also don't believe anyone else who seems like idealistically believes that such a project could happen. You go, I don't believe that. You think you're going to overthrow X, whatever, state power, something like this, not going to happen. But I think reframing resistance as these, and it happens all the time, but as these daily, smaller sites of resistance as actually being very powerful is super important and useful. And in the context of privacy, for sure, because even if everyone did just a little bit of this daily practice, the compounding effect of all that could be a lot more obfuscation, a lot more freedom for people to have a bit of distance from these the surveillance apparatus, or these very concentrated centers of power that can rule our lives in a difficult and stark way. And so it doesn't need to be the total project of overthrowing everything to get some distance from that. Sometimes it's just all the tiny things, all the daily things, and you put them together. And maybe this can be a way of people a bit more hopeful that resistance can make sense and can be useful for them in their actual lives. And you don't have to be a hardline, communist, whatever project you might have. It doesn't necessarily have to be that for you to get some benefits from thinking about this.
Yep, exactly. Just, I don't know, this accumulation of power and capital has this like deadly radiation on everything alive.
Yeah.
And that's how you kind of just protect yourself in a really small act of care.
Yeah, exactly. And that that again, you don't need to topple capitalism completely or X or Y to still have a slightly different relationship. And that slightly different relationship can be super productive. And I think many people get demotivated by thinking, but then I'm going to be some sort of hypocrite because I'm going to say I'm resisting, but of course I'm still entrapped. I still have a job or a corporate job or a this, or, I still want to go on a vacation. So does that mean and it's like, no, it doesn't have to be one or the other. Everyone can embrace these contradictions more, and you'll be happier not to have to pass your own purity test, and also more motivated to. I feel like that's a strategy to actually get everyone to submit and say, look, you're never going to really be able to do it. So just stay on Twitter and don't go off. You know what I mean? It's like a strategy from them. I think these are very important things, to be honest.
Yeah. Do you want to speak a bit about wallets?
Yeah, sure, exactly. I feel like I said so much about power and cypherpunk and nothing really about privacy yet, truthfully.
But that's a fundamental thing. Yeah. So for me, like when I think of privacy, for me it's like being cypherpunk and being conscious about how your data is used, is like resisting the power. So for me, it's kind of the same thing, or at least super aligned.
Yes, I definitely agree they're similar, but yeah, it'd be nice now to go into some of the practical nuts and bolts, because what happened for me is I read, so to get into the wallet stuff and wallet UX on Ethereum, but maybe also keep with a little bit about my background too, is that it all started for me when I'm a reader of Vitalik's blog, like many of us. And I read the stealth addresses. He has on his blog, he has a piece called An Incomplete Guide to Stealth Addresses. I read this one and just out of pure curiosity. And I think it had already been out for maybe a few months, maybe even almost a year. And I was surprised because I had never heard of it. Also, it was extremely simple cryptography. So like you heard in my background, I learned about elliptic curves and elliptic curve digital signatures. So this was just like the very basics of that. So I could fully follow all the tech here, where in some of the parts of Vitalik's blog, at least in those days, there were definitely things that I could not follow or were beyond my level. But this was fully tractable to me. And then I was somewhat impressed that I didn't see a lot of activity around this. And often with a Vitalik blog post, especially something so approachable like this, it was a very clear path about things that people could do to sort of take up what he's telling about and implement things that would utilize these stealth addresses in Ethereum. But nobody was really doing anything. So, or maybe a few. There were some. I found those who were, but it was not a loud thing at all. And my view in that time as well, because I'm someone who was DeFi, I was building around Uniswap. So I always saw Uniswap and always thought it was interesting. Like, I get it. If you want to make it in crypto, read Vitalik's blog and then just do what it says, And like what I think was amazing about Uniswap is like it was just took the sort of ideas. It wasn't directly from the blog, but some Vitalik had a post. There were some others all thinking about it. But I think Uniswap succeeded because it just implemented it with nothing else. The thing you don't want to do is go, oh, how can I turn this into something even better for me or add more bells and whistles? And like Uniswap is such a success because it was just the basic idea. The basic idea is the people who really knew what they were talking about said, I think there might be something here. And it just implemented radically exactly that. So that was always my thesis on like, if you want to be a crypto founder, go find those things and then just, it's amazing how often nobody's actually tried to build it. And then those who are trying to build it are trying to build it plus many other things. And very few people go, I'll just build exactly that.
That's a beautiful advice, actually.
Yeah.
For people who want to do something, because like, how do you get the idea, right? There are so many, you need to validate it, you need to find people. It's not that easy, right?
Exactly. And I think often people, though, they miss in plain sight that that there are these gaps, and we're such a nascent industry that how far you can go by taking a simple but really exciting idea and simply just do that. Try to limit all the other noise and just do sort of follow the design idea there as cleanly as possible. Uniswap is this great example of that. So that was sort of my thesis already. So I saw this thing and I saw it's like something I could totally understand and wasn't seeing that much activity around. So I said, okay, well, that's my thesis on how these things work. So I built like first thing I built around that was like a Rust library for just doing the low-level cryptographic operations for these stealth addresses. And the goal of stealth address is to have a way for people to transact more privately. What it gives you more concretely is transaction unlinkability, meaning I would say maybe the simple way to say this is receiver privacy. So you can see that the sender sent something, you can see how much or what they sent, but where they send it seems to be truly to an account that you can't link to any identity. So the receiver gets some privacy. And in a sense, the sender gets for privacy, the privacy of who they're sending to or where they're sending the funds. And so stealth address is just a really nice, really simple scheme to make this have a better UX, because you can already do this today on Ethereum or on a Bitcoin or any blockchain, but you have to, as the receiver, you would have to first generate a fresh random address and then over a private channel, give it to the sender. And one, that means every time you want to receive something, you have to do some work, so it's a little bit annoying. And two, you have this private channel, so if somebody were to find where I told you, hey, this is my secret address, it would break the scheme. And so stealth addresses just allows us to just have a one-time setup, and then every time anyone wants to send to me, they can use my stealth meta address or my stealth public key, however you want to think about it, to generate fresh addresses that on my behalf. So that's the scheme, that's the idea. And the goal is to, as you can see already, improve some UX of something you could already do privately on Ethereum today, but almost nobody does it, certainly not for every single reception of every piece of funds, because it was way too much work and friction that every time you'd receive, you'd have to first say, hey, I'm going to generate a fresh address and then send it to this one. Then you'd have to keep track of all your funds and all these different addresses, and the wallets are not set up for that. So that would be a very manual thing and very difficult. And so in the end, in practice, people don't. People often reuse the same address and addresses over and over, linking all of their on-chain activities in a way that's quite unsafe, or at least makes it very, very trivial and easy. One, just go to an EtherSend link and put your address in, and I know everything you've done on-chain. But it was there because that's the cleanest and easiest and safest in some ways way to interoperate with the chain for now. And so all we need are these UX improvements. Stealth addresses are basically sort of a UX improvement there to empower people to get some more privacy. So that was the beginning. But from there, I went down this rabbit hole because, of course, it's not quite enough. You can make the cryptographic library so people could use that. So, but you, of course, need to get people to actually start using it. And then there are many questions about, well, okay, now you can receive funds privately, but how can you operate on those privately received funds and interact with the chain in the ways that you know and love and still retain privacy? How can you do this with a good user experience where you don't need to fund each individual address with gas tokens in order to operate on that address and maybe not have to one by one use these addresses? And so I started to think about all these problems and frictions in the wallet and realized over time, or started to think about a potential model for a more modern wallet that would build in privacy seamlessly for you with things like stealth addresses, but you also have to add other technologies in the stack. You need other parties like paymasters or relayers to relay transactions on behalf of other people. You need these mixer technology as well for certain things, for instance, for the sender privacy or untraceability of transactions, and many, many other little details. But my end goal, what I'm really interested in, is I think it's going to be very hard to bootstrap real privacy. Lots of users who are already using Ethereum but don't get much privacy with the current techniques, where you really have to seek it out. It's very app specific, and like the actual wallets that everybody utilizes are not in any way private. And if you want to do private things but also interact with different applications, you'd have to figure out how to do that yourself by hand. Or each privacy protocol would have to integrate every single application in order to make a private way to interact with that. This does not seem scalable to me, and privacy gets way better if it scales, because actually we need a big anonymity set for the privacy to actually be robust. So my end goal is simply to have a wallet user experience which has parity or even a lot better than what we have today. The important part is that users aren't using this wallet just because of privacy. They're using it because it's a great wallet, and that they can do everything they could already do with the wallets they know and love, interact with all the applications on chain in a generic way. However, the privacy is baked in, and maybe some other features as well, like chain abstraction would be nice. And the tools are all, so I started looking at all the different EIPs and all the tools that we might need to build this up. And in my opinion, especially just post the Pectra hard fork, all those tools are ready. We have like these Legos, and somebody just needs to start putting those Legos together to make like a new wallet standard, a more modern wallet standard, which is, to me, the key change from what we have today is to break this idea that we operate address by address and ECDSA signature by ECDSA signature when we do operations on Ethereum. Even in Bitcoin, when you say, I want to authorize a spend, underneath you're actually touching many different addresses, many different UTXOs, and signing each of them. And this is abstracted away at the wallet layer. But Ethereum wallets are less abstracted. It's like we interact with Ethereum on almost like a low level. To me, it's like our wallets are as if we never shipped Solidity and everyone would have had to write in assembly. And I think it's a great fallback that we have. This is the low level way to interact with the chain, but wallets should have more modern abstractions. And only if you lose all the software that makes these things nice UX and easy, you could fall back on actually getting direct private keys, et cetera, the credentials you need to sign one by one to create the transactions the way we do today. So this is like a huge passion of mine. I'm really hoping to see us converge on new standards in wallets and authentication. And I believe finally that we can pair it with this ethos as well. And I think we've never seen a wallet which says, hey, maybe it shouldn't even be called wallets anymore, right? It's like, this is your identity freedom tech thing. This is the thing you can use that protects you and allows you to do these awesome things in the digital world, like, have your own payments fully disintermediated from the state, know what you're doing online, own your own data, all of this, and like sort of frame it also as something cypherpunk and ideological and hopefully like cool, even in my opinion, or at least useful. And so I see this opportunity in the wallet space, or in this authentication layer of blockchains and Ethereum more specifically. And I'm very excited about it.
And then here comes the question, what do you think, which data should be on chain and which data should be private? If we talk about wallets or decentralized ID.
Yeah, so the question was what data should go on chain versus not. And the truth is, this is where it is emerging. My goal, my focus is really on just the making sure or helping shepherd us towards these user experiences that will actually be exciting and not focused in a niche way on privacy that doesn't let it scale. But these details, like exactly which technologies we use here, I'm actually pretty open-minded. Like I spoke a lot about stealth addresses. I think they're an interesting primitive, but maybe it turns out all this stuff could be implemented more like entirely inside of a mixer technology, and I'm open. Similarly, which data should be on chain? For now, it's more difficult to obfuscate, for instance, like the balances of different tokens. You'd need like a totally different token standard or to be on like a fully private rollup or something. And so I'm not as focused on this, but this data could also be private. And so basically, I think it'll emerge, and I'm following mostly the practical, which things can we already get now and can we ship in a way that gives like a seamless user experience. It gives you something futuristic that you feel good about as a user. And I see a lot of opportunity like in the wallets and in this sort of address abstraction where we operate over a much more intricate address space and utilize mixers by default. So I definitely see that. For me, I'm mostly focused, I guess, on sender and receiver of anything or any operation that you do on chain being the user having the power to selectively disclose when and how that links to real world identities. But that these actual operations can be certain parts can be public. Of course, when we get to identity, there are things that you need to be, I think I like to put as much on chain as possible, but a lot of that should be in a privacy preserving way. So it depends what you mean. So as much as we can put on chain that's feasible and possible, or at least linked to the chain, great. But many of these things should be privacy preserving. Certainly in identity systems, we don't want everybody's name and a phone number and date of birth, etc., in clear text on these forever systems. This seems very scary. So yeah, somewhere in the middle, but I'm quite practical. I think we'll see, and it'll emerge.
Okay, almost final question. Like we are 30 years from now, and we won. We have the internet of our dreams, like cypherpunkish, private, secure, school UX, and artists embedded. How will it look like, and how the life would look like in this techno paradise?
Great question, and I really like this question. I think for me, especially, it matters how many years, right? In 30 years from now, what I see as possible, or my kind of dream, is actually not that I don't think we necessarily, going back to like state power, like fully unravel and topple these major institutions that we have. But I just think there will be this open public substrate that people will have the ability to opt into. And that these states will not see those as things fully just on the margins that they sort of need to eradicate or that are somehow like illegal, but more like something that they have to accept as sort of extra jurisdictional zones among and within them. And they will also use these zones to collaborate across borders as well. So I see like crypto and a lot of these more and free open source software and privacy tech as things that will be there is like this fundamental thing that humanity and individuals know about that they can tap into. You will still have these superstructures on top, like states and state money, but you'll at the same time, among and alongside, have things like non-state money and systems of governance and coordination. People living at, I might have an American passport and the Zuzalu passport, and I might use the Zuzalu one more often and actually organize my life around that one, and allowing people this like other option, The other one has some different properties. Maybe you can't call up, you don't have as many central parties, so you can't call up tech support in this. But yeah, and this will be for everything, for governance, for like coordination, for financial activities, which we're already seeing emerging, right? You have like your crypto bank versus the real bank, and they have somewhat different properties, but they're starting to live alongside each other, and people can organize their lives entirely around crypto stuff. Means a few different things. Again, means there's no tech support you can call up if you make a mistake, but also means you have a lot more sovereignty, and people will sort of mix and match these things. And this is what I would be very, very happy about. And again, seeing that these other powers actually have to accept these things, and it's like it's not a tension, destructive relationship, but it's actually like a happy relationship where it's good for everyone that they can opt out. It sort of relieves the pressures of the state a bit. So this is what I'd be most excited about.
Yep. So my last question, can you please recommend some cultural or art artifact for like people that you like and you think might expand someone's like perception life in general?
Specifically in the arts, I mean, I have the varying diverse interests that might be useful to people, maybe not at all. So, but I'm a big fan in cinema. I'm a big fan of like Tarkovsky.
Okay.
I think is a very interesting. These movies always confused me in a way that I loved. And so if you like to be kind of challenged and confused by what a movie is and how it works, this always felt also like it was looking towards the future. It's from a while back, but sort of open, dispersed way of looking at the future maybe. Yeah, in philosophy, I'm this major geek of different continental philosophers, and I feel like Deleuze and Guattari are still like a really interesting place to go to feel this anarchic spirit and a lot of things that I think would resonate with people who are also interested in privacy. So like this rhizome chapter, much talked about in the Thousand Plateaus, is an amazing place to start if you're into this kind of thing. And then yeah, what else? In art and in yeah, I still think the more I think about it, the more I am in love with The Matrix. Oh, what a great movie! So accessible, so real about the conditions of our lives right now and where we are, and amazingly prescient. So if you like something much more easy and fun than those other options, revisit The Matrix and see how much you identify with what it's really like there.
Wow, thank you. That's a wonderful advice. 3 in 1. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Thanks for watching. Ciao.